Well, good morning, friends. Good to see you here again. I had a really good childhood, I must say, when I go looking back at everything now. I had a man in my life that stood out. Not, I mean, in addition to my father. This man was my uncle. Now, he was related to me. He was from my mother's side of our family. And then I had a cousin, and he was from my father's side of the family. His name was, well, we called him Tink, but his name was Donald Hice. And my uncle's name was Frank Areford. Oh, I couldn't have wanted a better pair of people to grow up with. Frank was 6 years older than me, and Donald Hice, or we called him Tink, was 3 years older than me. So he's just fit right in between me and Frank. Frank used to take the two of us, me and Tink, on hikes and camping trips all around the woods in our area and the lakes and things. He was a very good man. And this one time that I want to tell you about now was we hadn't done anything for a good while. And summer was just ending up. It was sometime in, I think maybe October. Summer was over and fall was just beginning. And he said to me and Tink, I'm talking about Frank, he said, what you guys doing tonight? We said, nothing. It was a weekend. You know, we had been going back to school, but it was a weekend. He said, how would you like to take a walk out to the haunted house? What haunted house? I asked. Well, there was a road between these two towns in our area, between Carmichaels and a town called Crucible, which was a coal mining town. And along that road, now see, he didn't have a car at this time, and we would have to walk probably 2 miles. And I said, well, what do you want to do at the haunted house? He said, well, you know how, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I used to, these boys down at the neighborhood there, he said, I used to chase them around the yard. And yeah. He said, I would be a 40-eyed monster. And if I caught him, I said, then what happened? He said, well, if I caught him, I'd get him down and I would tickle him on the neck. And he said, I'd tickle their ribs and I'd pinch them and they'd jump up and run and I'd chase them. He said, it was a lot of fun. And I said, well, where's them boys at? He said, well, I don't mean them. He said, I just thought it'd just be me and you and Tink walk out through there. And he says, you know, we could play 40-eyed monster. I said, you chasing us around in a haunted house? He said, yeah. And I said, okay. we did. We went walking just a little before sundown. We got those 2 miles behind us and went out past old Gilbert Kelly's place, and I could look up on the hill. The sun was just beyond it setting, and I could see the silhouette of this old house. And I said, we loud up there? And Frank said, yeah. He said, all the kids in Carmichaels play up there. He says, they abandoned that house years ago. I don't really know who owns it. And I said, is it dangerous? He said, oh, I don't think it's dangerous. So there was a long lane. It was about, well, it was probably 500 yards long, going under these trees that kind of grew together over top of it, made it look like he's walking through a tunnel. But it led us up to the top of the hill to that silhouetted haunted house. So we got there just before like absolute dark. I could see it was in pretty sound shape, except from where I leaned around and looked, I could see that the second floor outside wall was missing. Somebody must have been, vandalizing it or knocking it apart or whatever. But there was a tree growing right there, and it grew up past that open place on the second floor. But anyway, we got into playing. He said, "Now I'll give you." He says, "I'll give you the 50, and then I'm coming after you." And so he started counting off. Me and Tink ran into the house. Well, Tink went this way and I went that way. I don't know where he ended up at, but I had gotten into a closet, and I was squatting down on the inside of the closet, but the door was broken so that I could actually see out of it. And I'm sitting there thinking, boy, I sure made a mistake this time. I got in here and I'm in a little box. He could just find me. Uh-oh, there he come. I heard him coming up the steps, quiet, sneaking. Oh, I had to stay there. So I just squatted down, got back into the shadows, and he snuck by me. And I could see him where the light coming in, all the windows was out in that house. They were knocked out. But the moonlight was shining in, and I watched Frank, the 40-eyed monster, sneak across in the rays of the moonlight coming into the house and spreading out on the floor. I didn't know where Tink was at. But Frank went on out into another part of the house, and when he did, I pushed the door open and I looked to my left, and I saw what looked like basement steps. So I got up out of there and I sneaked over to the top of the steps, and I looked. I don't know if I want to go down there or not, because there was a little bit of moonlight, but as it came over to the top of the steps, it only lit up about the first maybe 3 steps on the top, and the other just disappeared, just descended down into the black basement. But all at once, something started coming across the other room adjacent to me and was going to show up in this room where I was at in just a little bit. So I took off down the steps. I didn't want to go, but I did. I took off, and the light or the darkness that was ahead of me seemed so foreboding before, now almost seemed friendly, because I could disappear into it as that thing come across the floor up there behind my back. Well, that thing turned out to be Tink. I didn't know that. I got down into the absolute darkness. This is true. This happened too. I got down into the absolute darkness, and I ran almost head first into the stone wall where the house turned. The foundation went across. But I caught myself. I put my hand on that, and I realized I had to turn and go out into the open space, which was totally black, off to my right. And I couldn't see where I was going. Didn't want to run into big old spider webs or anything hanging down. So I held on to the wall, and I'm feeling, would you believe this? Now that house has been there for 30 or 40 years. And some character hung a mop on the wall upside down. Well, as I'm feeling my way along the wall, I could tell once in a while I was picking up a cobweb or something, but I heard the steps. Somebody was approaching the lit portion of the steps when I was just getting off of the darkened portion. Here it turned out to be Tink, but I didn't know it at that time. And I took off down that wall, moving even faster, and I got a hold of the top of that mop. Here it felt like a person's head and all that stuff hanging down. I didn't know what I had a hold of, but then behind me, I hear them clunking down the steps. I almost screamed out, but I didn't. I turned slightly to the right and kind of stepped out away from the dang mop, and I turned around and looked back at the stair steps, and I could see the light flooding down a portion of the upper part of the steps. Now, these steps didn't have any risers on them. No, nothing on the back. They weren't built, just the step treads, and that's all. And so I ran over there, and I got underneath. I figured Now, I did a little thinking. I thought if I get in that dark spot underneath them steps, when whoever if that's Frank, he comes down them steps, when he steps out into the dark, he's going to be kind of in the same shape I'm in right now. But when he comes around that corner, I'm going to take off up them steps. Here it wasn't Frank. It was Tink. I was sitting under there, and he always wears these white socks. And we go out in the woods, he's wearing these like black Oxford shoes, dress shoes. I said, what did he always do? Anyway, I knew it was him because he come walking down them steps. There come them white socks, and there come them black Oxford shoes. He's trying to sneak away from Frank. I couldn't help myself. I just reached out and grabbed him by the ankle. And when I did, he went trying to shake me loose. Dang near broke my arm. But here come both of us shooting up out of them steps, and Frank was nowhere to be seen. Well, I ran right on around and got on the steps that went upstairs. I don't know what Tank did. Here he turned out he ran over and got in the closet that I was in first. But I ran upstairs. That's where I went. Then things quieted down. I got up to the top of the steps, and I walked out through this little bit of a hallway, and I turned toward what I knew was the end of the house that was missing, but there was a door there. So I just pushed it open. And when I did, the old moonlight come flooding in the side of the house where the wall was missing, and outside stood this great big walnut tree. And I thought, wow. I walk over there. I thought, I don't know if this is safe or not. Look, the whole side of the house is out. And I was standing there in the moonlight, and I heard creaking hinges of the door that I had just pushed open. The door was going shut. So I turned around, and here Frank was crouched down behind the door. And I had pushed it open and stepped into the room. And so now I'm standing over at the end of the house that's missing, and I wondered, can I jump to that tree? Well, not from here, I can't. I got to have... So I took off running toward Frank. He probably wondered what I was doing, but I ran toward him to get a little distance, so I turned around, and I ran, jumped out the open side of the house, went through the air and hit on that walnut tree and grabbed it around. And here there was no limbs on that part of it. Was a good thing. It was just like a pole standing up straight, and it was about a foot in diameter. So I just jumped to it, caught it, and slid down. And when I slid down, Frank must have turned around and ran down those steps. And Tink was coming out of the closet, and Frank caught him. Got him down, was just a getting to him and a tickling him. And I was coming around the side of the house from the tree after I slid down when I heard that carrying on. And then the two came out on the porch. They come out on the porch and said, what do you guys think? Frank said, we probably ought to get out of here, Hank. He said, that was kind of fun, though. We'll have to come back and bring some more friends sometime. And then we walked our 2 miles back into Carmichaels. Thanks for dropping by, folks. Hey, just like everything that I'm going to do on this YouTube, this is true. This happened. Love y'all.